Yossi,
Aussi.
I miss you physically, So yeah. I'm also behind the screen. So very glad to give this talk. Actually, it fits really nice as a follow-up from that of Stepan. So Stepan addressed innovative attacks and trying to extract as most as possible information from side channel traces. So in my talk, actually, I will be looking at the way to protect the devices. So there's nothing magic. I don't have a methodology which is bulletproof, but I'll try to show that there is a methodology to design cryptography, which at the end of the day, after application of several steps, can be much more secure than it would be simply by applying masking or balancing techniques blindly. Okay, so this is the agenda of my talk. An introduction. I will quickly explain that there is a normative context. So there are standards in place to frame the security evaluation, especially for embedded systems, which are more prone to those side channel attacks. Then point 3, I'll explain actually that leakage detection can be done at several steps. Point 4, quantification of the security. So from the point of view of the number of traces, okay, so I shall exclude the computing power, okay, which is also which was addressed by Stepan before. Then conclusions, okay. So just a few words, mostly to the what I'd like to insist on is that I'm working on several committees for standardization, one of which is the ISO so subcommittee 27, which addresses the questions of the security of information technologies. And I will insist on two standards, so the 20085, the two parts, and the 17825. There will be a conference in July on those topics, actually. So we've seen that we need to talk more about the norms and the standards so that they are actually implemented and are useful in practice. And actually, the goal is to build a community around the application of standards. So I would say gist of my talk is to discuss about this circle where actually we input a design which contains some vulnerabilities. We want to detect what's wrong. We want to rate whether it is a minor or a major concern, attribute in case of a leakage to the resource, which is the reason for the leakage, and fix it. And then redo this circle till we reach a point where we have the guarantee that the design is secure to the best extent. I will explain. So what's interesting is that we are dealing today with cross-layer cyber-physical systems because the attacks we consider are really in the middle between physical attacks and cyber attacks. You've seen those hitting the top of the news, the attacks like the Meltdown, the Spectre, and more recently the Platypus, Minerva, also a TPM fail, a Clockscrew, etc. Okay, so it's something with a lot, I would say, of opportunities of research, both in terms of attacks, but also it's a challenge from the industry perspective to get the system, reach a sufficient level of security today and in front of the attacks of tomorrow, because attackers can come afterwards, after deployment. Okay, so let me start by stating a few words regarding the standards and the certification schemes. One of which is the ISO 19790, which you might not be aware of. You might have heard about what the NIST is producing. So NIST is producing the FIPS 140, and actually the version 3 of this 140 is directly a redirection to this ISO 19790. Okay, so NIST today has endorsed ISO standard for the evaluation of the cryptographic modules. So the primary goal, I would say, of the NIST is to explain what are the regulation for the US market. But actually it extends beyond USA, because it's actually a joint scheme with Canada, but also it's a model for many schemes worldwide. Just to mention KCMVP and JCMVP in Korea and Japan, for instance, but the area of influence is much more. So, in my own country, in France, we have labs which can test the security of cryptographic modules according to the FIPS 140-3 in compliance with this standard. Okay, so specifically, this standard is covering aspects related to non-invasive attacks. So understand side channel analysis. All right. And this is explained into a document, which is the ISO 17825. It introduces the notions of leakage detection. Time-wise, I would say time-wise, timing leakage, and also, I would say vertical. Like the power, the EM leakage. Okay. Also, it makes a reference to the 20085, which is more related to the certification of your experimental part, not the analysis, but the measurements of your side channel traces. You see, you don't want in an evaluation to claim that an implementation is secure just because actually the bench, the probes and amplifier and everything which makes up the acquisition system is inadequate or missing to capture the leakage appropriately. So even though you at the end of the day you use clever neural networks attacks, etc., if you don't collect the proper compromising signal, you will find nothing, and you will think the implementation is secure, whereas it is not. You see, so this is the reason why actually there is this in two parts this documentation to calibrate your measurement system. Okay. Now let me go into the more technical part of my presentation with respect to leakage detection. We are in an approach where we want to refine from the source code an implementation until it is released. And actually, I will analyze in 3 steps the security of the software, then of the hardware source code, and then of the hardware when it is placed and test and routed. Okay, so there are several checks to be done. Is my software Constantine, first of all? If it is not, it's a no-brainer. don't continue the analysis because it will be meaningless. Okay, so please first fix your software so that it is constant time. I will explain what can happen if we go a shortcut here without having the software being constant time. Okay, then about the hardware. So providing we expect that amongst the threats, the attacker will do some vertical side channel measurements. So are all my sensitive variables masked? If not, so fix until it works. And then go and see for analyzing, I would say, glitches, okay? And once everything is done, then you can claim success. The efforts have been worthwhile and your implementation will pass the FIPS, the ISO 19790, the CC, common criteria, etc. So as early as possible, top down, and actually this methodology is not a test you do at the end, but actually it can be used as a non-regression flow. So while you develop, actually you can even test the security, okay, which is probably a kind of good practice I want to share with you. And why going so deep? Actually, simply because moving forward, the design will be more and more complex. And so more bugs can show up from different interactions. Remember all the details of the physical level, and so all the abstractions of the more software description, and bugs are in between. And also, there are a couple of things you cannot control, like the influence of your compiler, right? So that's a bit the motivation. So I will be talking about horizontal attack here for software. It's about control flow leakage. Then I will be talking about vertical analysis, which is analyzing actually sequential logic, and then looking into the combinational gates in the first step about the glitches. Okay, so first step, you take your software, and actually there are two caveats you want to avoid. The first one is like to test the value of a key and execute conditionally some code depending on this value. Something else you want to avoid is dereferencing pointers which have been tainted as sensitive, because actually an attacker can easily flush so this table at some address and measure whether or not this part of the table is in the cache. So if it is, it really means that the attacker managed to narrow down the range of addresses in which S happens to be. Okay, so that's the first thing. And actually, you can instrument this methodology. So first of all, by doing this taint analysis, as I was mentioning. And so analyzing each time, from the sensitive variables that you annotated, you can propagate all the variables which depend on the sensitive variable in the code, and identify the line of code which are using so those sensitive variables in tests or as pointers. All right. And then you can refine to track that in the assembly. So maybe the compiler has done something odd, so you want to check for that, and then you get not the line of code, but the address in the binary where this leakage occurs, and you can check that this leakage is real using a debugger typically. You just insert a simple breakpoint there, and then you can count how many times this breakpoint will be hit, okay, on the subset of vulnerable addresses in your binary. Okay, so that's a methodology mostly agnostic into your binary production chain, and it allows you to track what are the constant time violations and fix them, hopefully. Okay. Second step, looking at the hardware, and now looking at so leakage in the values. So assume the control flow is completely deterministic. So actually, this fixes an issue. It also makes all your side channel traces aligned in time. Okay, like in the databases which were discussed in the previous talk, the ASCAD, the AISY, I noted here, all you will see those traces are perfectly aligned in time. Okay, so now we want to do value-based analysis to check that actually no plain variable is there because it's amenable to leakage. Okay, so they must be randomized, assuming this is the countermeasure we talk about. And why shouldn't they be randomized? Simply because the masking coverage is maybe incomplete, owing to some bug, or because actually the compiler simplified or maybe completely removed the masking. Okay, so here you see this danger. It's possible that if you run this methodology on a code which is not constant time, that you don't find any vulnerabilities because the traces are not aligned. And so you will have the false feeling that actually your design is secure, whereas it is not. It is not. An attacker will easily notice that the traces can be aligned, will use some pattern matching techniques to do so, and then will attack you based on power analysis, EM analysis. Okay. What's the methodology to detect a leakage on an implementation which is masked? Okay, so straightforward, like t-test cannot apply directly to masking. Here I'm actually showing a method which is a bit generic. So 2 steps. First step is in this loop, second step in this other loop. First step actually collect random traces which have the same input plain text, so to say, the same mask, okay, for the 2 data sets, but different keys. So plain text actually are random, but it's the same random for the 2 data sets. Same for the masks, random, but same random on the 2 data sets. Simply the keys, which are random as well, are independent between the 2 data sets. Okay, and from those 2 data sets, use any tool. I mentioned here it's about correlation, but try to see whether you can cluster them in 2. Okay, if you can, it means that this more specifically the time samples where you can do this clustering in 2 classes reveals the time samples which depend on the key. Okay, and you will clearly you will find a lot. Okay, so now focus on them. You collapse your traces just by keeping the samples which depend on the key. Clearly, what you want to do now as a second step is to check whether they depend on the mask. So if they depend on the mask, then you're fine, because it means that time samples which are sensitive in the key are masked. Okay, this is what you want to check. If otherwise, I would say the correlation, so between the set of traces, so for same key, same plain text, but different masks, if this correlation you see is good, so it means that the mask is not effective there, and so you have a leakage. Okay, so that's an easy 2-step method, and the first step is actually required because you might have some data which is not masked, but you don't care. Like, for instance, the control of your algorithm might not be masked, but actually it's not supposed to carry information on the key, you see. And that you can apply, it's very generic, on something you extract from a simulation at hardware level. So you extract the bits at each clock cycle, or you can extract the contents of your registers at software level, or on actual traces, so physical measurements. Okay. Last step, now you're pretty sure that everything goes well. So you see in the registers, so in the flip-flops, okay, at a hardware level. But now you want to check the combinational logic. And you know that they evaluate as soon as the input comes, so we can have what we call glitches. So I want to show you a glitch because it's always a big question. So what's a glitch? I know I should avoid glitch. There is a huge corpus of academic work on the topic of removing or tolerating the glitches, but what's a glitch? So let me show you a very simple glitch here. Okay, like, you know, we have a block cipher. The first step is to take your plain text and you XOR it with a key, so like add round key on the AES block cipher typically. Yeah? And so before doing that, you want to make sure your key is not plain. So you mask it. So M is random and it's masking your key there. The key is protected. And then you can go into your algorithm with a key masked, compose everything. Okay, simple implementation here. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume the gates have 1 unit of delay. And so actually the value at different points, A, B, C, D, you know, are on those chronograms here. Let alone for A, which carries the key. Other registers, combinational nets here are masked. This is a mask, the key is masked, and actually here you have by associativity, you have your plain text XOR the key, which is masked by M. Okay, looks good, you know, but now assume that your mask is not something given, but it is produced by a random number generator, and owing to some, you know, design implementation, it's not registered, but it is coming right from the PRNG, which might be, you know, some kind of a polynomial which is evaluated, and so you need to source some of the coefficients together, and so this M even might be glitchy, by the way. But what I want to insist on is that this mask can be delayed compared to the flip-flops. Because it is delayed, you can see there is an extra time here for the mask to be actually valid on this wire. And so actually it is coming late, and in this example, it is actually coming too late, because if this mask initially is not valid, let's assume it is, you know, at 0 value, then what I get in D is not, even in C is unmasked, and then this will propagate down to the combinational logic. And at the end of the day, yes, everything will be masked, but in a transient during a 2 gates delay time, there will be the key unmasked here and a sensitive variable that you can attack just by doing the straightforward power analysis, correlation analysis, or whatever. So that's the kind of glitches you want to detect and remove. Okay, so there are some methods to do so. So here, for instance, I show another kind of design where you have glitches. So this red design is bad, so don't use it. This one is a good solution with this XOR, which is glitching, but not glitching something sensitive. Okay, so as you can see, the two designs here, they share the same, almost the same structure, so to say. Actually, this one is a bit lighter in terms of gate count. and it is safe, by the way. So sometimes actually, the wrong implementations can be costing more than correct. And so what you have here in the curly brackets is the analysis of the propagation of the glitches. So in this case, you can show that whatever the values of the glitches, so the delays, which are inserted on every of the nets here, you never disclose the value plane. So whereas in this situation, actually you do. So what you have in boldface here, okay? So this is about glitch detection technique, which is as well necessary to track leakages down to the netlist, because coming back to my example, this example here, you can have an implementation where every net is statically masked, but not dynamically secure, owing to the races between the signals. Okay, so now you might ask, fine, and what if can I, shall I remove all the leakages, or can I tolerate some of them? So that's the topic of understanding how many traces for a given attack. Okay, so here I just want to disclose to you a framework, because again, it's so difficult to test all the possible attacks. And actually, attacks are still improving. Remember what Stepan presented. He's trying to fine-tune the hyperparameters, to improve them. So it's good to have a bound and to be on the safe side. Okay. So we came up with a framework here to find some bounds to attacks, and actually those are the best attacks, so the template attacks. So you see the bounds are not so bad. And something else I want to show to you actually, so this framework is pretty nice in that, it can adapt to your design. If you have a given signal to noise ratio, clearly it will affect the number of traces to break. But actually, all those traces, all those success rate traces or leakage information traces, they look the same. And actually, they only depend on the ratio between your number of traces divided by the noise. Okay, so if what I write here, if the SNR increases, that the number of traces increases as well. Okay, and this works without countermeasures and with the countermeasures. So that's the point, so to say. You have a baseline here for a given SNR, and you might be, able to break an implementation in a few traces typically, and then you will play on adding masking, maybe second order, third order, okay, and also might be on some block ciphers it is convenient to shuffle to process out of order, okay, and so you have a notion of like for AES you have the 16 bytes you can shuffle, for instance, okay. So you have an idea of the number of traces to break according to the countermeasure you will implement, you see. So that's actually a guidance from the 20085 I was mentioning earlier, okay. So that's it can help actually in choosing in the first place what is the countermeasure to implement. Okay, time for me to conclude. So it's possible to set up a methodology to verify an implementation end to end from the source code to the final implementation. This methodology is reverse compared to CC. In a composite evaluation in CC, you start from the hardware and then you test with the OS and then you test with the application on top of it. So the methodology I was showing actually is starting right from the application, the software part, okay? And most importantly, this methodology can be used as a non-regression approach to proactively detect vulnerabilities, which means this is a a DevSecOps approach. Okay, so I really believe this is the best practice to implement when we want to end up with an implementation that is safe. So you will find out there AES implementations which are constant time and properly masked. But now the next challenge is about PQC, post-quantum crypto, for instance. And so how to assess. So it's still, I would say, an open topic for the implementers today. And we highly recommend that. So the three-step methodology, this methodology be applied. Actually, you know, it is because looking at the NIST competition for PQC, this has become almost a requirement, being constant time. And now we are moving here because it's about checking what's the impact of the masking on the performances of the implementation. And it's really only a first step because today, you know, we are happy with protection against first order attacks. But moving forward, you know, depending on your the threat level, you might want to go, you know, in this category or that category, which means you expect to have high order protections. Okay, so thanks a lot for your attention, and I hand it over to you. Merci.